There isn't anything grand about the rising here. For some reason, waking up is the only temporarily easy part of existing. But then the memories flood in. The main town was once a fully figured, peninsula-style, safe haven for tourists and travelers as they passed through, on the way to life's greatest enigmas and treasures. When the earthquake started, it was as if the world itself had decided to rip apart. The ground trembled beneath their feet, then cracked open like the spine of a forgotten book, spilling endless waves of chaos. Buildings crumbled, streets buckled, and the sea that had once been a welcoming friend became an unpredictable beast, rising higher and higher with each pulse of the earth. The lighthouse had been his sanctuary then, an old, withered tower at the farthest edge of the town, where the light had once guided sailors home. Now, it was all he had left. As the tremors died away and the town was swallowed by the rift, he had stayed. At first, the idea of leaving had crossed his mind, searching for survivors, looking for any sign of life beyond the horizon, but the ocean had taken everything. What remained was nothing but ruins and a crushing silence that pressed down on him from all sides. He wasn't a man of many words or companions. Most of his life had been spent in the quiet hum of his inventions and the solitude of his thoughts. The lighthouse, however, was something different. It had once been a place of purpose, a guiding light. But now, in its solitude, it had become his prison. And every morning, as he awoke to the faint smell of salt water and rusted metal, the stark reality set in. He sat up in his small bed, looking out through the narrow, salt-streaked window. The sun was barely rising, casting pale orange hues over the water's surface. There was no one left to see it but him. His hand reached for the small mechanical device resting on the nightstand, a creation of his own design, meant to record and map the tremors, the shifting earth. It was a work in progress, like everything else in his life. A record of what had happened, even though it no longer mattered. The lighthouse had always been a symbol of hope, but now it was just another machine, standing tall only because it had to, holding onto its function by sheer stubbornness. His stomach growled, reminding him that survival meant more than just invention. Grabbing a metal canister, he made his way down the winding staircase, each step creaking under his weight. At the base, he paused by a makeshift stove, the remnants of a broken refrigerator in the corner, filled only with scraps and tins of food that he had scavenged from the town's remains. It wasn't much, but it was enough to survive. As the kettle began to hum and steam, his mind wandered, as it often did. He'd always been alone, even before the earthquake. The town had never been home to him in the way it had been to others. He'd come to this place years ago with nothing but the desire to build, to create. He hadn't planned for any of this. For the isolation, for the sudden, inexplicable end of everything he had known. It was as if the earth itself had rejected him, and yet, here he was, standing at its edge. The kettle whistled, dragging him back to the present. He poured the boiling water over a makeshift tea bag, his fingers trembling slightly as he steadied the cup. The steam rose up, carrying the faint, comforting scent of dried herbs, something almost nostalgic. He hadn't seen another soul in so long. It was as if his mind was beginning to warp, stitching together fragments of memory into ghosts that had no business haunting him. He took a long sip, feeling the warmth spread through him. It was the one luxury he could still afford, small, simple pleasures that didn't ask for more than he could give. The quiet was both a gift and a curse. It pressed down on him, suffocating him at times, but it also allowed him to think, to tinker, to create. But today felt different. His hand paused over the mechanical device, his mind returning to the experiments he had left unfinished. What if he could send a signal? He had the tools, the knowledge, the time. The problem was, there was no one left to hear it. No one but him. He stood up abruptly, setting the cup down on the counter. Maybe it was time to test it, to see if he could still do something that mattered. Even if it was just for him. He walked over to the cluttered workbench, where half-finished inventions lay in a scattered, chaotic mess. A handful of old, rusty tools, broken wires, and brittle schematics, remnants of attempts and failures. But there, in the center, was a small device he'd been tinkering with for weeks. A transmitter, crude but functional. If he could get it to work, maybe, just maybe, it would send a signal far enough out, beyond the horizon, to what? To who? He couldn't say. But he couldn't stop himself from trying. He powered up the machine, watching as the lights flickered weakly to life. The world outside the lighthouse seemed distant, an unreachable place, but in that moment, he felt a strange hope welling up inside him. Hope wasn't supposed to belong to him anymore. He wasn't supposed to believe in it, not after the earthquake had stolen everything. But it lingered, as stubborn as the lighthouse itself. Perhaps, he thought, if the light could still shine, then maybe, just maybe, there was something out there still waiting to be discovered. And so he set to work, hammering away at the device, his hands steady as they always were. The hum of the transmitter filled the silence of the lighthouse, a small, electric heartbeat that was all that stood between him and the unknown. The signal would go out. Even if it was only to the sea. Even if it was only to the ruins.